And boom goes the dynamite.
All right, welcome into another edition of Daily Dive. I'm your host, Renee Washington, bringing you the live conversation each and every day, Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern time, to talk lacrosse. And joining me to get into our top story presented by the Daily Dive store is producer Mike, because breaking news, the New York Riptide have fired GM Jim Veltman after the 0-3 start, as they said so professionally, relieved him of his duties, which I don't love those terms for other reasons. But anyways, Veltman did join the Riptide in July of 2020. They did issue a statement saying, "We would like to thank Jim for his contributions to the organization. We wish him the best in all of his future endeavors. He has been a big part of drafting star Jeff Teat, who we've talked about as recently as our show yesterday, as well as re-signing him. 0 seasons in the playoffs since 2020. And now Executive Vice President Rich Lisk will assume the GM role, and Jim is out. So a major move in the NLL after a winless start. Mike, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the breaking news around this firing?
This is going to sound bad. Riptide, gonna Riptide. No. So this in 2020, I believe, was like the Riptide's inaugural season. Ever since then, they've gone 7-27. I don't care who you drafted. I don't care if you drafted LeBron and Michael Jordan and Jeff Teat and Michael Phelps. The issue is he hasn't built anything around this guy. And obviously they felt like the 0-3 start and coming out just disgustingly flat against Toronto was an issue. It was only him and Callum Crawford doing something. The goalie, Steve Ollerman, has been off and on. Obviously, they felt like something had to be shaken up because the roster had not been.
Yeah, and we've seen so many times across where teams have a superstar but don't take time to build around them. And year after year, it's the same conversation of what are those other pieces. And I use the Baltimore Ravens as a great example because Lamar Jackson had an MVP season and they made a deep run in the playoffs and still have not been able to find since then any pieces to put around him. Now he's getting injured and banged up and run down. And you hate to see that when superstars are not getting a chance to compete for a title. And more importantly, they're wasting their precious peak years because they don't have pieces around them. So I think the decision in the front office makes sense because after July of 2020, you could definitely say it's an inaugural season. You can chop it up to that. But another year goes by, and here you are underperforming and now 0-3 in some games that they could have and should have won. And were not good results when you look at how they lost those 3 games. So.
Yeah, and their attendance has also been low too. I don't know how much the GM is putting into marketing, but obviously you got to do something. And if you guys have Jeff Teat on your roster and Callum Crawford, a legend with 1,000 points and a superstar who's already number 1 in the league supposedly, why aren't you selling tickets? Do people have no faith in you? That's a huge problem to me, and I think it has to fall on a GM.
Mic drop, literally. Mic drop. I mean, look, there are a few teams that are winless right now. I'm not saying it's great, but I think I always think it's how you lose. And I was just talking about this with some others because the NFL, we're seeing that right now with a lot of coaches, coordinators, GMs getting fired because they didn't make the playoffs. It's how you lose. You're 0-3 and you have very low attendance. And as you talk about, you have a player in Jeff Teat who, as we've talked about on this show many times, ranked number 1 in Lax Mag, coming into the season has had the expectations of being not only just one of, but the best player in the NLL. 2 points in their loss this past weekend. So overall, how they're losing, you look at the overall production, the lack of fans, which means revenue's not there. If you're not selling tickets, you don't have butts and seats, you're not making money. So it is a business. Beyond just the results, there's a business that goes into this. And for the Riptide, they're not meeting those expectations on any of those levels. So that's a great point you bring up that we forget about, just the business aspect of it as well. Things that make you go, Well, we did see Teddy Jenner post on Twitter saying he didn't think that New York would be the first to make organizational changes. This is a major move. This is not something we see as often in the NLL. Do you anticipate some more possible moves like this in the future of GMs or coaches, or just some major changes and shakeups?
I'm sure a few of the high-end teams, to me, like if they keep on just getting good and not good enough. But I have to wonder about this Riptide team. Is the coach next? I like that the GM they hired was in-house, which means it's not like some new regime coming in to set the guys that they want in there. I like that it's a guy who's just promoted or has a different role now. And so maybe he will trust the coach, because like I said, they were flat. Last game, they were flat. And I was not a fan of that. So maybe if this does not jumpstart them, I wonder what has to. And like you said, other teams, Vancouver, how you doing?
You gotta wonder. And we'll talk more about some of these winless teams and take a deeper dive into that as well. But as we mentioned, for the Riptide not having the numbers, you look at week 6, and I know Mike pulled the attendance. Week 6, they had just over 4,100 people in attendance. You're 0-3. You have a very low turnout for attendance. They were actually the lowest that we've seen reported right now. The Firewolves and Nighthawks actually have not reported their week 6 attendance yet. The Mammoth, Ring Night, Banner Night, Reese Dutch with a historic 1,000-point career night, had 11,239 people in attendance. That's what is the latest report. And then we also saw the Swarm around that 8,300 mark. The Seals just around 62, almost nearing that 6,300 mark. But the Desert Dogs and the Riptide, 2 teams and franchises that are newer in the last years, 2 teams that are winless, and 2 teams that also had 4,000 in attendance. So, interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. We will keep an eye on how attendance continues to progress as the season goes, but it is by no surprise that the winning teams also have more in attendance. They're getting more excitement. So they're taking care of business on the field and off the field to make an exciting atmosphere for the players, coaches, and the fans to enjoy all the excitement of the NLL. Well, we've got to get into more of the excitement around the NLL. I guess coming back on the show that's been here before, no stranger to Daily Dive. Cooper Perkins will be joining us. Seals play-by-play broadcaster, the founder of Lax Metrics, is back on Daily Dive after having a great opportunity to broadcast 2 games this weekend to give us an opportunity to peel back the layers and talk about the Desert Dogs as well as the Seals. So more to come here on Daily Dive in just a moment. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Daily Dive. We've had an opportunity to get into the top story around the firing in New York. Well, let's take a look at some other teams and what's going on. So welcoming in now Cooper Perkins, who's been here. Welcome back, Cooper. Seals play-by-play broadcaster and Lax Metrics founder, and a man who is always busy. So I'm excited to have a chance to talk to you about the games you had the opportunity to be on the sidelines for. So welcome back to Daily Dive.
Thanks for having me, Renee.
Yes. Now, you had the opportunity to broadcast 2 games this past weekend, so good job on that. Did a fantastic job. Let's start with the Las Vegas Desert Dogs. Obviously, one of the winless teams right now. They get that home loss to the Wings. What was the good and the bad you took away from what you saw for the Desert Dogs?
Parts that were good for them, the first of which get out in their transition game a little bit more. And that's really was emphasizing to them, and something that we getting off the floor, getting the off position to succeed offensively when into that game, and seeing them be able to goals in transition as well was really a positive. Additionally, I think they did a pretty good job of their offense, and it can take a little bit of time because they are an expansion franchise at the end of the day. It's a growing process for them, and take away from that and feel good about one glaring thing that's missing from that team, have a star. And it's I think in building that roster, right? An expansion franchise trying to take several of long time City had Ryan Benesh at the beginning of last season before. But Panther City, Las Vegas, I should say, doesn't have that. And so you have a situation they're doing things by committee, but they could authority to be able to take control of things. Philadelphia team that just figured things out on the right. Joe Resiteritz were phenomenal on the right. Paul Day was envisioning when they went out. And, it has less to do, I think, with an 0-3 team, and more to do with they found actually be a top 3 or 4 team in the league this year, forward from kind of middle of the pack into could be in where they've been trying to get for the last couple of years.
Yeah. You bring up some great points there, and just talking about how they do have a lot of mixture of veterans and different experience. Joe Resiteritz, a player that you bring up, but they don't have that star. And I know we were just talking about previously how the Riptide have the star, but don't have some of the pieces around Jeff T. Well, for the Desert Dogs, they're missing that star that can get them over the hump. So when you look at the way that they've started, obviously winless, you're saying that their record maybe shows a little bit better than their winless start. What are your thoughts there?
0-3 for a reason. To look at those three games and say that they should have won. But I think there's a lot to be optimistic about how things are trending and what direction they're moving. 0-3 to 3-0 overnight. Reasonable to think that this is a team that could win, towards the end of the season, because, and we saw it with Panther City last year. I think there was an expectation that they might be a bottom. By the end of the year, they were pushing for a playoff in the postseason, but they kind of look like as the pieces start to fit together, different strategies in building their rosters, Panther in their prospect as Las Vegas is kind of a veterans and younger players. So together will be interesting. They have a really big Cooper who is similarly struggling, but so I'm curious to see what Las in week 10 or 11 as opposed to it. But from what we see, I think was a really encouraging Las Vegas fans and NLL fans a lot of team be competitive than have a team be competitive,
Yeah, absolutely. Your neighborhood sounds like my neighborhood with ambulance rolling through. I have the same thing every once in a while. But you're right. I think
of West Hollywood.
Oh yeah. I think you're right in that. This week and actually as the season progresses, we'll see more from the Desert Dogs. It's going to take time, and it's definitely not going to happen overnight. You're the new team on the block. You're figuring out a lot of pieces. You've got a lot of new. So that's as much as we always harp on the talent and everything. Doesn't matter how good you are. It's going to take time to settle into a rhythm and figure each other out, learn each other's tendencies and things like that. Well, a team that has I remember when they were the new team on the block and they figured each other out to say the least, as they have started undefeated. The San Diego Seals knocking off the Warriors. The game was actually close late. What did you feel like was the difference? We've seen the Seals in a number of games come back, tight games down the wire, but finding ways to win. What do you feel like was the difference for the Seals this past weekend?
I think that the was probably the consistent goal from their young netminder, Chris Wrigley. He wasn't fantastic, and he made a couple of big saves. He didn't really let in any soft goals. He was able to build a 5-goal lead late, job chipping into that to try and make things close, but it's in the building and hopefully not on television in danger. They half offensively and started to find a rhythm and then built upon that in the second. Something that maybe last year or the year before we might not be able to take a little bit of and instantly pick up where they left off. Thing we've seen from them to a complete 4 games. The first 3 there was one significant area of shortcoming. That was a big issue. I don't think you could Saturday. It wasn't perfect. Vancouver, top tier team in the league. So the question is like that same consistency to what's really encouraging, because I know that was priority, establishing that consistency, more level in their play, and they did consider. As far as lacrosse games go, ebb and flow to everything, and team up runs. I thought they were about for them, especially only a few weeks into the season, especially the circumstances of the evening. Right, your break only started once before. That's a big over as a team that has a lot of capable shooters. The game has the possibility to go a lot of different directly, and those shooters get hot, as my broadcast several times throughout the broadcast. So you should really be happy with where they are. It's the first time this season that they'll see a repeat of Pawlowski is probably the best adjustment. That Calgary is much more ready than they were a couple weeks ago up in Calgary. Very welcome news that will give us a better idea of great, but it's 18 games together for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you were cutting out a little bit there at the end. I think the ambulance knocked out your Wi-Fi as you were going through it. No, just kidding. But honestly, you're right. This is a San Diego Seals that's much more consistent. We're seeing them put together full games. They've got a lot of offensive firepower, but also seeing on the defensive side in net that consistency, which is so huge. To have that confidence too, to be able to rely on your team to get things done on both ends of the field. So as they get ready to face Christian Del Bianco, who's also playing really well in net, and the Roughnecks, it'll be very exciting to see if they can remain undefeated, especially since, as you talk about, Cooper, Calgary's much better now than where they were a few weeks ago. We've seen the progression. We've seen them getting better with each game, and this is exactly why we have a nice long season, and we don't decide playoffs and champions in the first 4 weeks. So San Diego undefeated, and the Desert Dogs winless, but polar opposite teams in terms of what they're looking to focus on. So thank you for joining us on Daily Dive to be able to shine a light on what you've seen, what's been going on in Vegas and in San Diego. And again, hope to have you on at some point in the future as well.
Renee, it's a pleasure as always.
Thank you. Cooper Perkins, everybody, San Diego Seals play-by-play broadcaster, Lax Metrics founder, analyst that also works with the Desert Dogs, been able to work with so many different teams and able to join us here on Daily Dive to shine a light on what we've seen so far from the 4-0 San Diego Seals and 0-3 Las Vegas Desert Dogs. So let's keep talking about those winless teams. Hate to keep beating a dead horse, but let's talk about it some more. We'll be right back here on Daily Dive as we predict the future for these winless teams in the NLL. Welcome back to Daily Dive. I'm Renee Washington. We had our guest Cooper Perkins on talking about what he thinks the Desert Dogs need to do as a team that doesn't have that superstar versus on the other side, the San Diego Seals, who had the superstars, are undefeated and are playing consistent lacrosse. I won't say it's always strong. We've seen them struggle at times, but they've played consistent. And something that seems to be a difference in professional sports usually comes down to that consistency. And right now, there are 4 teams that are consistently not getting the results that they want. So joining me back here, producer Mike, let's dive into this a little bit more. We've talked about the Riptide as they the news broke out earlier today that they have fired or relieved of his duties general manager Jim Veltman after their 0-3 start. Obviously, we were just talking about the Desert Dogs. Georgia Swarm also 0-3, your hometown team. And then looking at Vancouver, 0-4. And so, let's start here. Which team do you think is going to get a win first? Obviously, we know that upcoming, we do have a game between 2 of the winless teams. The Warriors are going to be facing the Desert Dogs, so someone's coming away with a win. But somebody else could win this weekend. We've got also the Swarm taking on the Bandits, the Mammoth and the Rock. We've got Vegas taking on the Warriors, and the Rush. So obviously the Warriors taking on the Desert Dogs twice before Panther City. And then the Riptide face the Nighthawks, the Firewolves, and then the Bandits. So I feel like I answered the question even as I was going through that. But who do you think is going to be winning first from this group?
I know we missed our picks last week. First of all, for the Georgia shot, 65-7. That's a good mic drop. Congrats to the Dogs last night. The Bulldogs, that is.
Yes.
I kind of believe the Warriors get the Desert Dogs this weekend, but I feel like Vegas wins at home. And but I feel like that's kind of cheap, but I feel like that's more of a bull take and just saying, oh, well, one of these teams wins. So I think they split them.
Okay. And I feel bad that we didn't open the show shouting out your team, the Georgia Bulldogs, for winning the national championship. They didn't just win; they rolled.
That was ugly.
And you know what? I was disappointed because every year, this is a quick sidebar. Every year with the national championship, I'm usually working Monday nights and never can watch the full game. And this year, I was like, yes, I can see the full game.
So excited.
I'll be there. I was ready. And then it was 65-7. And it was like every drive, Georgia was just scoring. So, yeah. But
too bad the Swarm can't do that.
Right. There's some success in Georgia and some winning back-to-back championships. And the Swarm trying to get a little piece of those winning ways. I do think it's not the Swarm, it's not the Riptide, especially looking at their schedules. It's going to come down between the Vegas-Vancouver game. I I don't know fully who wins that game. We're not doing our picks yet. It's only Tuesday, so I still need more time to marinate on it. But as of this moment, I want to actually go with Vegas, not just to be different from your pick,
Right.
but I think that, like Cooper was just talking about, they are right now, it's by committee. They don't have a superstar, but they are also new. Whereas Vancouver, they've had struggling seasons year after year.
It's in the head.
It's in the head. I think it's more mental. So I think the Desert Dogs, if I'm them, I can justify an 0-3 start more. Like, we're new, we're figuring things out. Like, there's a lot more rah-rah in the locker room. I don't know if the Warriors have that same rah-rah. So I'm going to actually go with the Desert Dogs to win this one. I don't know.
I like that too. How about this? Which team do you has looked the worst? Because I think it's the Riptide. Like, if you break down the games that they've played, the Warriors were at least competitive against the Seals, but the Seals turned it on whenever they wanted to. The Swarm played the Wings well, for what that's worth. The Desert Dogs played their first half well, and Riptide's best finish was coming back from like 10 goals against the Seals.
Yeah, when you look at the results, I actually agree with you there. The Warriors have had some closer games. Of course, they also played Calgary twice, but that second game was not close.
Right.
The Riptide, I think what makes the Riptide's losses worse is that they do have more expectation. Like, at one point, I had them in my power ranking in like the top 6.
Ooh, gross.
I hate to say it, but you have the best player in the league. We expect more from you. I don't think we expect as much from definitely Vancouver and Vegas. I think Georgia is we expect them to just be in the mix. Like, I put the Swarm with the Wings. Like, I expect them just kind of be in the mix, be competitive, win some, lose some. But I expected much more from the Riptide. I was definitely not thinking they were going to be an 0-3 team. I thought they would have won against like Halifax, maybe squeezed out at least a better game against Toronto instead of getting destroyed in that third quarter for a 15-7 loss.
Walked off the floor.
Yeah, they got, it was very eye-opening. So I'm going to agree with you that the Riptide is not only had they lost worse, but I think it's just more shocking that they're in this group right now. And when you look at their schedule, I don't see them knocking off Rochester. And Albany's playing well. And then they have the Bandits. So my question to you, let's flip it. Who's going to be winless the longest? Because looking ahead, it doesn't get any easier from here.
I'd like to think, because the games are in New York, that the Riptide find lightning in a bottle, and Jeff T just. My prayer is that Jeff T hears what I've been saying. Like, I posted a reel about going off on him. I hope he scores 10 goals and they just win to shut everybody up. I really think, though, I like the Warriors. I think it's the Warriors because I like the mental aspect is just not good, like you said.
Yeah, I think it's going to actually be the Georgia Swarm.
Sorry, Lyle. Sorry, Jeremy.
I'm sorry. I just don't think they're going to be able to beat. I mean, they just lost 18-9 to Buffalo.
They don't seem in sync.
They don't. It just seems like I don't ever like making excuses, but it makes sense to me why Vegas is losing. But Georgia, it doesn't. And playing the Bandits again, playing the defending champs in the Mammoth, playing the Rock. I think the Rock game they could potentially win, but I don't know that. I think they're going to be 0-5. And then Toronto is a game that they might win. But then the other thing is, I do not think that the Riptide are going to beat the Nighthawks and the Bandits. So unless they beat Albany,
that's what I was thinking too.
It's the Riptide. I actually think that the Vegas Desert Dogs and the Vancouver Warriors, looking at their schedule, Vancouver plays, obviously they play each other twice, and then they play Panther City. They should win one of those games. And then for the Desert Dogs, they also should win one of those games. They do have Saskatchewan. It's actually, in my opinion, going to be number 1 overall, Jeff Teat and the Riptide, or the superstar Lyle Thompson and the Georgia Swarm that I think are going to be 0-5 or 0-6.
Swarm also have a worse goalie problem. I believe they in that game I was watching with the Swarm and the Bandits. I know it was the Bandits, but good God Almighty, it wasn't like it was Hogan. It wasn't like it was the big three scoring. It was Hogan and two guys that you don't hear about too much. To be all honest. And they switched the goalie out twice, like the same goalie. I'm like, you can't do that because that messes with his head. And now it's like And like I said, the offense for a bunch of firepower that everyone brags about, I don't see like that moving the ball like the Bandits do or the Thunderbirds do. Just not happening.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just very disconnected. Definitely, if you can't defend and you look at the game versus the Bandits, that is a great example. It wasn't just Dane Smith and Josh Burns scoring. You know, they had a lot of players that had 6 points, 8 points on the day. So we talked about it as it's great for the Bandits that other players are stepping up, but it is more on the side of the Swarm struggling defensively. So a lot to keep an eye on. Our predictions are the Riptide and the Swarm actually being the last two teams winless in the NLL that are going to be 0-5 or possibly even 0-6 looking ahead. But let us know in the comments who you think is going to be the last team standing to get a win between the four that are still seeking that first victory in the NLL. But that being said, we've got more to get into this week. We're just scratching the surface here on Tuesday, as we've got more to dive into later this week. We've had a chance to talk about the winless teams, so the good, bad, and everything in between. I should say the good, bad, and the ugly. The winless teams, the teams that are in the midst of some overhaul in the front office with the Riptide firing GM Jim Veltman, as well as having Cooper Perkins on the show to talk about the Seals and the Desert Dogs. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to another edition of Daily Dive. As always, check us out Monday through Friday. We're live 12 p.m. Eastern Time, bringing you all the latest. So for my producer, Mike, I'm Renee Washington saying have a terrific Tuesday, and we'll see you back for a wonderful Wednesday edition of Daily Dive.